Well, it was an epic win for the Panthers to come away with the win at Lambeau Field over the Green Bay Packers. But to talk more with me about that win and what it means for this team moving forward, Julian Council with Locked On for the Panthers. Julian, what's your first reaction to this win, man?
Wow. That's my reaction, Myles, because I don't know about you, man, but going into this week, I didn't have much faith in Carolina to win this game, let alone be competitive. And why would anyone feel that way coming off a 40-9 loss at home against a Bills team that is one of the best teams in the NFL? And when they played week 4 in New England against a Patriots team that we didn't know was that good at the time, they also got drubbed in that game. So there was really no evidence other than the fact that it's the NFL. It's a week-to-week league. Any given Sunday, there really hadn't been much evidence from what we had seen on the field this season that the Panthers were capable of winning a game like this. And I saw a stat from Trey Wingo that Carolina had lost 14 straight games against teams that were above 500. An insane stat that finally came to an end today. So, yeah, my reaction is, wow.
I mean, definitely a wow. And we got to talk about the details with this one as well. Rico Dowdle, he got that start, but also that banged up offensive line. So were you surprised to see that they were able to still get that run game going today?
Honestly, no. If you've looked at the offensive line this season, they have now had 7 different starting combinations in 9 games. They had Jake Kurhan have to go in there at right guard for the injured Chandler Zavala, who just came off of IR on Saturday to come and make the start in this game for all the other guys who've been injured at right guard, as Robert Hunt's on IR right now with a biceps injury, and Brady Christensen ruptured his Achilles last week, and he's done for the season. But they've played to a standard every single week, no matter who's been at left tackle, who's been at left guard, who's been at center, right guard, and right tackle, respectively. They have all gone out there and played as one and played to a standard that has been set there over the last season. And it just points out to how important it is to have depth, but also continuity, because they brought back 9 of their top guys from a year ago, and they've needed every single one of them and more so far this season. So I'm not surprised by the ability of the offensive line to be able to play to that standard again today. And I'm also not surprised that Rico Dowdle, who has run so hard every time he's had an opportunity, whether it's been in a running back rotation the last couple of weeks or the 2 weeks prior to that where he was the starter against Miami and Dallas, that guy has been on a mission here in Carolina. So no, I am not surprised by how the offensive line and Rico Dowdle in the running game performed today in Green Bay.
Yeah, we saw him talk about that after the game. He just wants to punish every defense that he faces. And we also heard Dave Canales talk about having those veterans, especially with the offensive line, be able to kind of plug and play whenever they need be. And we obviously see that need to be an impact today. But one thing when we talk about confidence, though, we have to ask about Bryce Young, because his numbers don't necessarily pop out in this game, but he got things done when it mattered most. So how much confidence are you growing with Bryce Young right now?
Well, when the game is on the line and it's late in the fourth quarter, I think there's a reasonable amount of confidence that people should have in Bryce Young, considering this was his 9th game-winning drive as a Carolina Panther in his career, since he's only been a Panther. And the 11 games that the Panthers have won with Bryce, 9 of them have come in this fashion as game-winning drives, and a number of those have been walk-off wins like they had today and like they had a couple weeks ago at home against Miami. And it's incredible to see that he goes out there, throws for 102 yards. And if you told me going into this game, that's the amount of yardage Bryce is going to throw for, I would not have told you the Panthers were going to win this game. But they were able to overcome that, I suppose, and win again. And Bryce makes the throws when you need him to make them. On 2nd and 8, finding Jalen Coker for that first down, finding Tedero McMillan later on that drive as well. That then allows him to continue to have the bounce and hand the ball off to Rico Dowdle, who rips it off for 19 yards to put them in field goal range. So, yeah, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, Bryce Young leaves you wanting a lot more production out of the passing game. But when it matters most, late in the game, he's able to make the throws, make the plays, and lead his team down the field. He's done it 9 times so far, and I wouldn't doubt him doing it again later on this season.
Yeah, it's definitely really impressive to see that chemistry growing with some of those young pieces, like you mentioned, like Jalen Coker, even Jimmy Horn getting some of that action, even Ted McMillan as well. You talked about it, though, earlier last week. Obviously, a different defense that we saw against the Buffalo Bills, giving up over 40 points. So what was working for them in Lambeau Field against Jordan Love?
It comes down to the red zone, Myles. Green Bay came into this week 7th in the NFL, converting 70% of their red zone trips into touchdowns. And when that is the case, you're going to have a really good team like they've been so far this season. But today, they were 1 for 5 and 0 for 4 in their first 4 trips to the red zone, settling for 6 points before then. And that is just not winning football. And also the takeaways. They had the fumble there, Christian Roseboom getting the punch on that opening drive for the Packers. Later on, there was an interception that was on kind of a non-consequential drive that did lead to, I believe, a field goal for Carolina. But just the red zone defense, that's where they won this game today. And if they weren't able to hold down the Packers, who had over 100 more yards than Carolina offensively today, then this would not have been a game that Carolina would have won on a walk-off field goal. So that's where it starts right there, stopping Green Bay in the red zone, forcing them into a turnover, forcing them into kicking field goals. That's where the Panthers defense is able to get ahead and win this game.
Yeah, a couple of takeaways as well. Those 2 picks. Probably should have had a third one with Mike Jack. We're not going to give him a hard time about that one, but definitely impressive.
And that could have been a pick 6 too, because you looked at the replay. He had acres of space, and there's maybe 2 offensive linemen he was going to have to contend with. I'm guessing Mike Jack would have outrun them and been able to elude those guys. It just would have come down to, would he have had enough gas after running 103 yards to get into the end zone? So that was a close potential game changer, and that just shows you, like, the Panthers, even they made their own mistakes in this game. Like, that would be a mistake. Yes, it was still a turnover on downs. Good job by the defense to be able to get another red zone stop, but man, you have that. Then you wouldn't have needed a field goal at the end of the game, I'm guessing, as well. So, yeah, good, unfortunate moment for him, but obviously it worked out for Carolina at the end of the day.
No, you have to go back to the offense here for a second, because I do have to ask the question.
Yeah.
Obviously, we saw Rico Dowdle getting over 20 carries in this game. So where can they plug, if they can? Where does Chuba really fit into this moving forward?
Well, he fits in when Rico is tired or if Rico's a little banged up, which was the case today, as he was clearly battling. It looked like a groin. That's the time you got to bring in Chuba at this point in time, because we have seen so far through the first 9 weeks of the season, we're more than halfway through this year, Rico is far and away the better back of the 2 this season. And when you look at some of the numbers across the league, he's one of the best backs in the NFL, behind Jonathan Taylor and behind James Cook, who we know ran all over this Panthers defense a week ago. So unless Rico is dealing with something injury-wise, or if he's just fatigued, I don't think you need to see much of Chuba Hubbard at this point in time, especially when you consider what they're getting out of the pass game, or really what they're not getting out of the pass game. Rico Dowdle is their offense, that offensive line, their ability to get a push up front. That's been the best part of this Panthers offense and what's led to some of these wins over the last month and a half. So I don't think you're going to really see too much of Chuba other than what we saw today, just getting sprinkled in here and there when Rico needed a break.
One thing I heard Dave Canales talk about at halftime during this game is that when asked, basically what they thought about the game so far, that they felt like they could belong and they could really keep up with some of those top teams in the NFL. What's your take and response on that one, though?
Well, they showed it today. They hadn't shown it in the past. If you look at the season so far, I don't think much of Jacksonville. It was a poor week 1 performance really by Bryson defensively as well. Overall, just for the team, I guess they didn't play well. Clearly, as they lost by 3 scores, I don't think Jacksonville is a great team, but they're in the playoff hunt so far in the AFC. You look at New England, you look at Buffalo very clearly at 7-2. New England is going to be one of the top teams in the AFC this year and possibly could get that number 1 seed. And Buffalo's going to be right there with them, contending for the division and also contending for that top seed once the playoffs roll around. So at least against the top of the AFC, they've shown that they are not on that level. They've shown that they are certainly not one of the bottom teams in the NFL, as they beat Miami and beat New York, even if those were 2 close games that they played. And then you beat Dallas, who's right there, I think, at your level. And Arizona has not won a game since losing or since beating Carolina in that failed comeback attempt by the Panthers. So they did show today that they absolutely belong. And it's one thing to talk about, it's a week-to-week league. You cannot lose your confidence in the league and all of that. But, man, you got to go out there on the field and prove it. They had shown through the end of last season against Kansas City, against Tampa, against Philadelphia, went on to win the Super Bowl, that, yes, they can play with these teams, but can you beat them? Can you get over the top? Can you climb the mountain and do that? And they did it today in a setting and against a team that I don't think many folks believe that they would even be within a couple of scores, because the line was 2 touchdowns, Myles. And in the NFL, that's a disrespectful line. You don't really see those. And Carolina went out there and they took it. They earned a respect today out on the field.
Definitely earned that one. And it's kind of crazy because I remember hearing some of the players and some of the questions that we asked them about what their most favorable or recognizable moment is at Lambeau Field. I feel like this one might have to top that, at least so far this season. But I know we got the trade deadline coming up here. Could you see any moves coming from the Panthers moving forward here?
Possibly. I was reading Dan Graziano of ESPN.com earlier this morning, some of the intel that he has, and he was asking us about teams like Carolina, who's right there in the middle. They were 4-4 entering this week, and if they won or lost, do they feel like they're in a position to buy and really go for it this year, or do they think they're not right there as far as this rebuild and that they want to just kind of stand pat? I don't see them as sellers. I don't think it would make sense to move off of Chuba Hubbard. I don't know if anyone at this point in time wants to pick up that contract. He's in the first year of a $33 million deal, and it's unlikely he sees all of that money just based off what we've seen through the first 9 weeks of that deal. But still, there's value of keeping him around if anything were to happen to Rico, which obviously you don't want to see. And I think pass rush is what you'd be looking for, but everybody in the league is looking for a pass rusher heading into the deadline on Tuesday afternoon. So will Carolina be aggressive? We have not really seen them be all that aggressive in years past. So we'll see if Dan Morgan's willing to do that, but I'm guessing there probably won't be too much movement. Maybe, if anything, they get a pass rusher, but what would the price be? And with two young guys, and Prince Umami Allen, who didn't play today but should be back probably next week, and Nick Scorton, do you want to go out there and give up some assets for someone else who may be just a one-year rental on your team? So we'll see. I think they likely stand pat, but with the 5-4 victory, especially or being 5-4 in the victory against Green Bay, that may change some things for Dan Morgan, Brett Tillis, and the rest of this front office.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens here. I know some of the asking prices for some of those big names. It's a little bit above my pay grade, but we'll see what happens with that one. But yeah, last question for you. 5-4. Are you surprised to see them at this point in the season?
I thought they had an opportunity, really. You looked at the first 7 games, I didn't see any of those opponents as teams that Carolina could not beat going into the season. I felt like after that, that's really when the schedule would get tough. And we saw last week against Buffalo that maybe that was going to be a harbinger for things to come. Well, week-to-week league, they turn around this week. They went on the road against Green Bay, who was the top team in the NFC coming into this game. So if you can beat the Packers, you can beat the 49ers. You can beat the Rams. You can beat Tampa. You can certainly beat Seattle. And, Lord, you would think you would be able to sweep New Orleans. And you've already shown that you are better than at least that one Sunday when you won 30-0. You can beat Atlanta. So I am not that surprised that they're in this position. I don't know if I would have thought they'd be 5-4. I would have thought maybe 4-5. I thought that certainly was possible. I felt like this was a team coming into the year when I was talking to Nick before the season about the whole buy or sell thing that we did. And I bought the idea that Carolina come December would be on the graphic there on Sunday Night Football, and it'd say in the hunt. And you look at the graphics now through 9 weeks, they're in the hunt. They're sitting there 8th in the NFC, right outside that wild card spot. So I'm not really that surprised, but I absolutely am surprised that they're 5-4 and have won this game. So Panther fans should get excited. This is the biggest win since God knows, I don't know how long. Maybe Minnesota back in 2017 as far as the quality of opponent that this team beat. It's been a while, certainly since David Tepper's bought this team, that there's been days like this for Panther fans to be excited and dare to dream with New Orleans coming up and in Atlanta after that. That could put them in position, certainly, heading into the final 6 games to where they could really have something on the line. So I'm surprised by today's result, but I'm not necessarily surprised about where they're at this point in the season, 9 weeks into it.
You're excited. I know you're excited. I see that too. So, I mean, it's definitely been impressive the way that they've been able to come away with some of these wins, at least so far this season, and hopefully they can get this confidence with such a young squad moving forward and they're racking up more of those wins like you talked about. Julian, always appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.